Hey everyone, welcome back. Happy Thursday. Hope everybody is doing well. I can't wait to see you guys. And we are going to read chapters 3 and chapters 4 today. So I'm just going to read both of them in this recording. So just a reminder, yesterday you guys read the end of chapter 2 and our main character, was punished. He couldn't stop speaking in puns, which I hope you guys enjoyed that lesson. Just kind of a fun one, a play on words. So without further ado, let's read chapters 3 and 4 and see just how much worse things get. All right, chapter 3, bad words. How was the library? Mom asked when I got back home. Okay. I took a deep breath through my nose. Something smelled great. I'm making pot roast, Mom told me. I lifted the lid and peeked into the pot. It smells totally stupendous. Can you stick this in the fridge for me? Mom asked, pointing to the dessert she'd just made. It's your favorite flavor, butterscotch. I took the bowl from the counter. It was still warm. Sure, I don't mind putting it away. Mom stared at me for a moment. We'll be eating in 15 minutes, she finally said. The sooner you let us eat, the better, I told her. I left the kitchen and headed into my room to drop off my backpack. Behind me, I heard Mom muttering something about me going through a phase. I ran into Dad as I was coming out of my room. Hey, Logan, he said. Don't forget we have some yard work to finish up this weekend. Is there a lot more to do? I asked. Yeah, Dad said, giving me a funny look. There's a lot more to do. You need to put that fence around the tomatoes. Right. We'd need to be garden them from the rabbits. Dad groaned and shook his head. What's wrong? I asked. I was getting tired of all the groaning. Benedict had groaned at me, so had Mrs. Tonkia. Mom had groaned. Now Dad was groaning too. Nothing, Dad said. I guess I was just as silly when I was your age. He reached out and ruffled my hair the way he does when he talks about the good old days. Then he headed downstairs and I followed him to the kitchen. My little sister Kaylee was already there. I sat and we started to eat. But every time I said something, they all groaned and rolled their eyes up at the ceiling. Except Kaylee. She kept giggling. I bent under the table and looked at Buster, my dog, who was waiting for me to slip him a treat. Buster panted. That was a relief. At least my dog doesn't groan at me, I whispered as I patted him. Buster groaned. Maybe it was really a yawn, but it sure sounded like a groan. I dropped a piece of pot roast on the floor for him anyhow. After dinner, when we'd finished clearing the table, Kaylee came over to me, grinned, and said, You're funny, Logan. Just like my cartoons. Thanks, I said, although I wasn't sure that was a compliment. But she was the only one who wasn't groaning at me, so I figured I'd better take whatever nice words I could get. And it turned out the problem followed me to school. I had trouble right away the next day. First thing after morning announcements, we had language arts, which was a fancy way to say English. There's a woman standing up front with Mr. Vernac. She was short and thin, with a friendly face and long black hair. Class, Sir Vernac said. This is Miss Glott. Say hello. Hello, Miss Glott, we all said. She'll be joining our class for the next month as a student teacher, Mr. Vernac told us. I'm thrilled to be here, Miss Glott said, giving us a big smile, and that made her look even friendlier. You'll find we have some very clever students, Mr. Vernac said, and I don't think there will be any problems while you're here. He glanced at Benedict when he said that. Now, let's get to work. He pointed to the vocabulary list on the board. Logan, the first word is isolate. Can you use it in a sentence? Sure, I said. I'm sorry it's so late getting here. Everyone started laughing. Everyone except Mr. Vernac. He frowned and gave me the next word. Justice. Just as I was leaving home, my dog got loose. Mr. Vernak's frown grew so big his eyes became slits. He said one word, decide. My dog chased the cat around the side of my house. Logan, is this some kind of joke? Mr. Vernak asked. No, Mr. Vernak. I was just doing what you asked. I clamped my mouth shut. Nothing seemed to be coming out right. He stared at me for a long time, and then he sighed and said, very well. I'll give you one more chance. The next word is industry. That was easy. There's no way I could mess that up. The cat got stuck up industry and wouldn't come down. I listened, as surprised as everyone else when the words came out of my mouth. I sure hadn't meant to say that. Mr. Vernak spoke just 2 words of his own. He pointed towards the door. Principal was the first word. Now was the second. I walked down the long hall. What seems to be the problem? Principal Chapinski asked when I stepped into her office. I started to explain, but every time I said something, she chuckled. Then she started laughing. Finally, I sat back and waited for her to stop laughing. You're quite some boy, she said between laughs. I nodded, just afraid to open my mouth. Don't lose that sense of humor, no matter how much other people groan, she said, after she'd managed to catch her breath. But keep it to yourself in class. Mr. Vernak is a wonderful teacher, but I suspect he's never going to appreciate your talent for wordplay. Now, go buzz on back to your room and behave. Thanks. I'll try to behave myself. I got up from the chair and breathed a big sigh of relief. Principal Chapinski started laughing again. Finally, she shook her head and waved towards the door. As I left the principal's office, I thought about the strange stuff that had been happening to me. I hadn't noticed right away, but once I started paying attention, I realized one thing for sure. Words weren't coming out of my mouth the right way. They left my brain just fine, but after that, they went horribly wrong. I was just so used to saying what I meant, I had to listen carefully to catch the mistake. But there was no doubt. Every time I opened my mouth and said more than 2 or 3 words, a joke came out. No, not a joke. Worse than a joke. A pun. And people seemed to hate puns. They might laugh, but after they laughed, they groaned. How was this happening to me? It was almost like I was being punished. Punished. Oh my word. As I thought about the man in the library, a shiver ran down my spine, and then it ran back up, and then it slipped into my stomach and gave me a hard kick with a pointy boot. Maybe you need to be punished. Those were his words. He'd done this to me. I had to go back to the library. That's what I'd do. As soon as school was out, I'd go find him. He had to be there. If not, I was doomed. Chapter 4. A confusing explanation. I found him in the reference section downstairs, sitting at a table and reading a book. Hey, he said as I walked over to him. What'd you do to me? He said. Then he glanced up and smiled at me. Oh, it's you. Hello. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Professor Robert Wordsworth. He held out his hand. Logan Quester, I said automatically as I shook hands with him. Wonderfully appropriate, he said. That didn't make any sense, but I was going to worry about that at the moment. I had more important things to learn. What did you do to me? I asked again. Every time I open my mouth, a pun comes out. Then I realized maybe it didn't happen around him because he was the one who'd punished me. If he had listened to all my bad puns, I guess he'd be punishing himself too. And you think that's my fault? He asked. Well, you said I should be punished. He nodded. Perhaps I'm partly to blame. But you have to admit you brought this on yourself. You weren't punished for no reason. Well, make it go away, I said. Sorry, I can't. Why not? Only you can remove the punishment. He paused and tapped his finger on his chin and stared up at the ceiling. If I remember correctly, it takes 3 steps. Just so happens I might be able to help you with your quest. He reached in his jacket pocket and pulled out a small camera. What's this for? I asked. Step 1. Bring me 7 oxymorons. He handed me the camera. Oxy what? I asked as I took the camera. It was heavier than it looked. He reached in another pocket and pulled out a pen and a notepad. He wrote one word, tore off a sheet, and handed it to me. Oxymoron. I have no idea what that means, I told him. How am I supposed to bring you something if I don't even know what it is? Excuse me. He ignored me and started reading his book again. I pointed at the camera and at him and pushed the button. Nothing happened. And I pointed at myself. Still nothing. It's broke, I said. He glanced up from his book and shook his head. You mean broken? If you have no money, you're broke. If the camera didn't work, then it would be broken. It isn't. It works perfectly, he told me, but only when you're taking the pictures you're supposed to take. Now, you'd better get going if you want to make any progress. You need to get all 7 pictures within 24 hours. He pointed back at the clock on the wall. The time was 5 minutes after 4. Why? I asked. He shrugged. Why doesn't foot rhyme with boot? Why are there only 2 ways to spell 1 and 3 ways to spell 2, but only 1 way to spell 3? I didn't make the rules. But if you take more than a day, you can forget about ending the punishment. He turned away and went back to reading his book. This was crazy. I had no idea what oxymoron meant, and it was obvious he wasn't going to tell me. I sighed and looked around at the shelves that surrounded us. Of course, I said, hitting myself on the side of the head with my palm. I can look it up. I ran off to find a dictionary. No running, he called after me. I grabbed a dictionary and looked up the word, even though I had a feeling it wouldn't be there. It sure didn't look like a real word. But it was. Oxymoron. It meant a phrase containing contradictory terms. Great. I still didn't have a clue. On top of that, now I needed to look up another word to make sure it meant what I thought it did. I kept my place with one finger and thumbed through the dictionary to find contradictory. In my mind, I imagined going from one word to the next until I had all 10 fingers holding places like they'd been caught in some sort of awful paper trap, never finding out what anything really meant. But it wasn't that bad. It turned out that an oxymoron was pretty simple, just a phrase where the 2 parts seemed to have opposite meanings. The dictionary gave some examples. Pretty ugly, strangely normal, and sweet sorrow. I got it. Pretty was the opposite of ugly. So even though pretty meant something different when you said pretty ugly, it still made you think of opposites. Even oxymoron was an oxymoron. It came from a couple of Greek words that meant sharp and dull. I had to admit, the idea itself was kind of fun. It would be really cool if my entire future weren't in danger. I tried to think of where I could get a picture of something made up of opposites. And not just one, I needed 7. Right off, I got an idea. I left the library and went down the road to the supermarket. It sold fish, all kinds of fish. It even had a tank with lobsters. And if I was lucky, it might have something else. Most places that sell fish sell shrimp too. And shrimp also means small. I went through the door and followed my nose to the seafood section. They should call it the smell fish section, I thought. Sure enough, there in the case on ice were these really huge shrimp. And I saw the sign I remember from last week when I went to the market with Mom and Dad. Jumbo shrimp. Shrimp means small, jumbo means big. That absolutely had to be an oxymoron. I pointed the camera at the shrimp, held my breath, pressed the button. If nothing happened, I'd be in big trouble. Click. Big sigh. 1 down, 6 to go. All right, guys, that is chapter 3 and 4. We are almost already halfway through the book. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all on Monday.